Grassroots is brought to you by Work It, meeting the needs of entrepreneurs in Stillwater since 2017. Welcome to Grassroots, a podcast series for growing civic engagement through conversation. I'm Chris Peters.
And I'm Michelle Charles, and we're your hosts for this series. So for the races we're talking about in this series, Election Day is February 8th. Early voting will begin February 3rd. On this ballot, voters in Stillwater are going to be asked to choose the next mayor and to decide a couple of propositions, one that would increase a dedicated sales tax for transportation and one that would increase the city's visitor tax. Hi, welcome to Grassroots. I'm Michelle Charles.
And I'm Chris Peters.
And we're here today with Stillwater City Manager Norman McNickle and Director for... Remind me, Becky.
I was just going to let you sweat it out.
No, it's some kind of innovation. You are an innovator. I know
Chief
that.
Civic Innovation Officer.
Thank you.
Becky Taylor.
That's right. That's right. Becky Taylor, Chief Civic Innovation Officer. Well, thank you guys for being here today. We invited you down to talk to us about the proposed transportation sales tax. This is something that, transportation is a big issue in any city. We know that. I know that, the condition of streets and roads is one of the top things that our elected officials say they hear about. So we just wanted to, talk to you guys about what is the situation and what's going on with roads and road funding, basically.
Yeah, before we get to that, though, we're going to kind of clear the air a little bit here. So listeners, both Michelle and Becky and Norm, they have this mantle of when, like, Michelle does the news, when she reports on something, like she is the city editor, she's asking these two questions all the time, right?
That is true.
Norm, I always get like, Michelle's like, oh, I just got off the phone with Norm. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night.
I know, poor Norman. He's so good to me.
Yeah. But Michelle, so in the news, there's, you're going to write about something, you're going to cover something, and that means you can't editorialize on something, correct?
Oh, yeah. Basically it means I'm not going to editorialize on it. It also means that I don't need to be slinging my personal opinions around about it.
Okay.
And if something does personally affect me, then I kind of have to pull myself out. And if I don't think that I can pull my personal opinions out of the reporting, then I need to basically kind of recuse myself and get someone else to cover that.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to do sort of a gut check.
Yep.
And just be sure you can be unbiased in how you're reporting.
And that's the mantle that a journalist takes on.
Exactly.
I'll be honest, for me, I cannot put that mantle on this particular subject. So, folks, I am going to come from a position where I do have a bias. I've served on BPAC, the Bicycle Pedestrian Ad Hoc Committee is the actual one. And I've just been involved with groups and advocates to try to make Stillwater more friendly for people walking and riding bikes, plain and simple. I cannot do what Michelle does and separate my opinion from things. So in this episode, that's just kind of what you're going to get from me. I'm sorry.
There you go. Well, that's good to know.
And try to ask questions because, for most of us, we don't have that mantle that you guys have. And I'd love to actually hear your guys's, basically your definitions of the rules that you play by when you have to talk about a subject like this, especially it being a tax. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the tax and what it can and cannot do. Does that sound good?
I think it sounds fair.
Let's start off with Norman.
Yeah.
Feel free to introduce yourself, say something about yourself, and then how is it wearing that mantle of you have to kind of play this neutral ground, right?
Yeah, we do. So I'm Norman McNickle, city manager. I've been in Stillwater since 1970, with the city since 1976, in various forms and capacities, and we are precluded in this situation from giving our opinion or saying, please vote yes. We cannot do that. What we can do...
Or no.
And what we can do is provide information. And so that's what we're here to do today is provide you with information and hopefully answer any questions you have about the upcoming proposal. We think we know the content pretty well.
Okay. And we're going to talk about that because basically this solution, like it's problem solving, right? And city staff as a whole is to solve problems of the city and present solutions. And this is one that you're presenting to the community to say, we think this, might help. Becky.
Yes.
You're kind of new to this show, right?
I'm very new to the show. It's been over a year, so I don't know at what point I'm supposed to not use the I'm new card, but I'm still holding on to it tight. But I've been in Stillwater. Well, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then when I was looking to go to college, just picked a random school, and it happened to be Oklahoma State. So I landed.
How lucky are we?
I know. There you go. I'm glad you consider yourself lucky. Good.
We do.
That's good. So I moved to Stillwater when I was 18 by myself and went to school. Ended up getting married. We moved back to the West Coast and then moved back with our 2 kids. And my husband brought him as well. When was that? 2011. So
okay.
We've been back, and really the 2 roles I've found myself in prior to this one with the city were in advocacy type roles. I mean,
Okay.
I was with TSET, where I worked on building healthy communities, and I worked with the city a lot on that as a partner. And then with Our Daily Bread, where I was trying to shine a lot of light on food insecurity and bringing groups together to meet that big need that we had in our community, and worked along with the city as a partner with that as well. So in this role, I am enjoying the problem solving, and I'm
Okay.
enjoying working with the same groups that I have in both of the roles. And instead of the city being my partner, it's me working with the city and using the partnerships that are outside of the city. So I am finding it challenging and good and useful, and yeah, I'm enjoying it. So.
It's kind of being more of the cog inside the system rather than one having to, adapt from the outside, maybe. I don't know.
Well, and also, I think that's really cool, though, because the fact is you are used to working with different groups of people, bringing people together to try to address an issue. But now you're part of that institution that people tend to look to for help when these problems come up, as opposed to being the struggling nonprofit or whatever that, kind of needs the help.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's a different side of the table. But I guess in my 2 positions prior to this, I never saw the city as an obstacle to get through. It was always a partner to work alongside. And that's how it needs to be. And so now when I'm in the city and I hear of people who think of the city as an obstacle to get through, it's not something that I've never experienced. That it's always been it's a partner, and how can we work together to get to a healthier community or to solve hunger together. And if we can work alongside together, just how much more can we get done? So really, these initiatives that we have on the February 8th ballot, and then hopefully again on April 5th, are what we can do to help move that needle forward in ways that we can. And we need the community to come together to do that.
Okay, so speaking of that and transitioning into that, what exactly would this tax proposition do, this one that's designed to help fund transportation projects?
It would solve a problem that has been long-term here in the city of Stillwater in terms of customer complaints from our citizens. It is the number one complaint about city government, is that our roads are in cruddy shape. And I will look you all in the eye and tell you, yes, they are, and particularly in certain places.
You mean there's no reality distortion field where you guys,
no.
your cars magically don't bump on the road or run out of a sidewalk?
We'll drive through the streets.
You
and
guys
say,
live in the same place.
City.
Huh.
Yeah.
Right.
Imagine that.
We do. There are big holes in alleys, and there are sidewalks that aren't connected, and there are trails that aren't completed, and we would like to do all that. And we simply do not have sufficient revenue to both maintain the streets and reconstruct them. And there's been a lot of deferred maintenance because we don't have that revenue, and the situation is just getting worse. Oklahoma is the only state in the United States that does not allow municipalities access to ad valorem tax or property tax, whichever way you want to call it, for operations or maintenance. It's only for capital projects. So we live and die by sales tax. And in all transparency, the profits that we make from the sale of electric utilities and the sale of waste management. Water and sewer money all stays there, goes into capital for those two entities to maintain the infrastructure.
Now there is a little bit of a transfer that helps support some funding in the general fund, though, right?
From waste management and from electric, yes. Right. That's what I say. We live and die on sales tax and those transfers, the profits that we make on waste management and on electric, by far the biggest.
Right.
And we currently, out of the 3.5 cents that we currently collect, a penny and a half of that is dedicated to other things. One penny is dedicated to the purchase of electric power, and a half cent is dedicated to the purchase of or to maintain transportation issues. So that amounts to about $4 million a year. So everybody says, well, that's a lot of money. So let's just travel with me now, if you will, to the corner of 6th and Duck.
I'm in my car. I'm picturing it.
Are you?
I sit a long time at that night.
I do.
At that light at night when I'm driving home from the paper and I take Duck and I hit the lights and there's nobody else around. That's a separate issue. But flashing red lights at night would be nice. Anyways, but I'm there with you. I've spent
You've
many
traveled.
times.
You've traveled.
Yes.
You've traveled to 6th and Duck is what you're saying.
We're at 6th and Duck.
Yes.
All right, let's look north now.
Okay, I'm looking
and
north.
Just imagine that we can see all the way to McElroy. We've gone a mile.
Yes.
We can see a mile. So 1 lane mile, the average cost of 1 lane mile, and frankly, this has probably gone up over the last several months. The average cost to reconstruct 1 lane mile of that street is $1 million.
And that's a full surface reconstruction.
That's a full
stabilizing
surface
the road bed and everything, right?
Yes, and that's 1 lane. There are 4 lanes there. So 1 mile of a complete reconstruction is $4 million. That does not take into account the pipes that are into that street.
Okay.
Because we learned probably the hard way some years ago that if you don't replace those pipes when you repave a street, that is the exact spot that it's going to break, and you're going to be cutting up a new street to go in and repair the pipes. So we take care of that while we're reconstructing the street. So you have to add that to the cost of reconstructing those streets.
How long ago was that lesson learned, would you say? Like, because I know that, and when we talk about these problems, this ain't unique to Stillwater.
No,
this is pretty much
not.
all of Middle America for sure. Any towns that have been around for more than the last century are going through this like wave of we got to rebuild infrastructure all over. So I'm not trying to be like, when did the city staff at City Stillwater learn this lesson? But when did that like click?
Well, that like clicked while I was still public safety director. So
okay,
I can't claim credit for that.
Yeah.
And
how long ago was that?
6 years.
Okay.
So at any rate, we do that. And that's not to say that a brand new pipe couldn't cause us problems. It could.
Sure.
Right.
But so there goes an entire year's budget for 1 street.
Sure.
That's no improvements, no better travel arrangements, no bike paths, no
better sidewalks.
That is
drainage.
That is 4 lane miles of street reconstructed, period.
Okay.
And since you mentioned drainage.
Yes. Drainage is another issue.
Well, I know, and it's not connected directly to the tax, but to a degree that it is.
Right.
So the older parts of Stillwater, and now travel with me to the intersection of Miller and Duck.
Okay.
there.
And when we get more than a half inch of rain, that intersection becomes full, and cars run through there and they stall and they drown and all kinds of things happen.
Yes.
The reason for that is that back in the day, when that infrastructure was installed, Stillwater experienced, at the time, what were known as 25-year storm events were the exception and not the rule. In 2019,
Yeah, 2019 or before the
I think.
pandemic.
2019, we had 6 25 years of events and a 200-year event. So,
And to be clear on that, these are like a level of rainfall. This is not something. I mean, if you have a 100-year event, it doesn't mean you're good for 100 more
No,
years.
it just means that's the likelihood.
well, that
happening.
used to be
Right.
the odds makers would have told you that, well, you've had one, it's going to be 100 more years before you have one.
Sure, but this is
But-
like the severity,
Yes.
which is on average going to happen no more than
Which means that at some point, if it's happening, you redefined what 100-year is.
What normal
and now,
is.
Now that
Yeah.
100 years or 25 years or something like that, right?
That's right.
yeah,
So now we go back to Sixth and Duck.
right.
And we say somewhere under that street, there needs to be some size of pipe, and someone needs to tell us where to take that. Where does it go when it crosses that line at Sixth and Duck? We currently have a master drainage plan in progress, and that would assist in these transportation projects, knowing what we have to do into those streets to cure that as well.
I think this is a really interesting point when you talk about transportation, because there are so many moving parts to a transportation project. You've got to deal with drainage, so you're dealing with the stormwater department. You've got to deal with the utility lines that might be right in the middle of the street in some cases. You've got to deal with,
Things you don't know are there.
Things you
That's
don't
what we
even
learned
know.
from Monty Carnes is sometimes
Yeah.
you go up and they're like, oh, there's where that pipe went. I do remember a while ago hearing that there's really not a whole lot of great records on some of that infrastructure underground from decades and decades ago.
You're right. There is not.
and you find it when you tear the street up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes when you hit it.
It's like renovating an old house.
So
An expensive old house.
for about the last 10 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
Time flies. Anything that's been installed has been installed with GPS locations. So to really do Duck Street the way we would like to do it, back into a boulevard like it existed when I first arrived here.
Okay, so we're going to travel with you into the future where it's been returned to a boulevard. What does that look like? Describe Duck Street for us.
Okay, Duck Street would be a 2-lane road with a median in the center of it, with protected turn lanes and wide pedestrian ways on each side.
Stop, Norm. You're just teasing.
10-foot wide pedestrian ways on each side, as we have been installing over the last several years.
Right.
And I have actually witnessed, I've viewed drawings of this.
So
Okay. So this is like the big wide kind of trail sidewalk that's along Western,
Yes.
that type of thing?
For the sidewalk
well,
portion.
for the sidewalk part, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but not a path like that. Like it's not a.
You're talking about a wide median with grass and trees.
Oh,
Yeah,
no. Well,
yeah.
I know. I meant for the bicycles and pedestrians.
Yeah, but I think when people hear that, because that's right up against the road almost.
10
in
footer.
some parts. Yeah.
Okay.
But
All
yeah,
right.
anyways.
Okay. So we've got a nice median. It's going to control left turns. It's going to.
Right turns.
Okay. And
all
also,
those
it gives people a safe place to stand if they're trying to get across the street, right?
things. It does.
Well, and yeah, and ideally the traffic
And-
would be slower on that type of main. So where we got it, because there's a lot of students that cross Duck up there by Elm and
that's
all
true.
there.
Right.
There's a lot of east-west foot traffic that goes across there.
And
Okay.
improved signalization and all of those things.
Okay.
That price tag, do everything underground that we know of at this point, $13 million.
Oh, wow.
This chump change, come on.
So
My goodness.
we started a minute ago down a path about how the taxes split up. So So we talked about a half cent that goes to transportation now that produces
Right.
about $4 million. There's a penny that goes to SUA to buy wholesale power that's about $8 million. And then there's 2 cents that go to the general fund. And of that 2 cents, there are departments in the city that are required by state law or they're required by charter, and they cost money to maintain. So in the average year, and admittedly this year it's a little higher than this, our tax, this is for 2022. Fortunately, we missed our revenue projections, and it's higher than what they said, but hey, that projection happened during COVID. You had no idea what was going to happen. But at any rate, in the average year, we would collect $23 million. So you've got the general fund with $23 million to spend and actually it's 23.9, so let's call it 24. So departments that are required by state laws, the city manager's office, finance, legal, police, and fire. And when you total all those up and what it costs us to provide those services, it's $22,264.
Okay.
So you're down to about $1 million left. The next department mandated by city charter is general government and insurance and the library. That's another $6 million, and you're way out of money.
So you're saying we're in the hole.
You're
by
in a
the time
$5
we do
million
all that.
hole, yes.
So that's where the SUA transfer comes in.
That's where the SUA transfer comes in.
And that's why the sales tax money is all you have for roads.
That's right.
Okay.
There you have it.
There
Does
you
that
go.
math add up for everybody?
Yeah.
It really took me a while
We're dealing
to
with
kind of
negative numbers.
understand that. And when we were talking with Chris and Christy, and there's the big number of 68 million or something like that for all the streets, right?
About 68.5, yeah.
Imagine that as $68 million in debt.
Yeah.
Like there is, because that's with interest, because that's just, if you don't do anything, you don't pay off anything, like it's just going to keep growing. Like the streets they just wear out. Like stuff just wears out. But you guys are tasked with trying to figure out how to operate in that and do with what you got. So now basically the solution is we need a little bit more, and we need people to pitch in.
Right.
We do, and we had a great deal of discussion about, do you go to a bond, which would add to people's property tax? Do you do a sales tax? We landed on the sales tax because we are a regional destination. Mm-hmm. Stillwater is a regional destination. I think we have a service area of about 90,000. We have people that come here from Ponca City, from Enid, from Sand Springs, from north of Edmond, from Guthrie, from all over the place, Cushing. And they spend money here. Mm-hmm. And they use our infrastructure. They travel on our roads. And so this tax does not affect just the property owners. It's everybody that uses that infrastructure. And I think Becky would tell you that tell us about your $150 grocery bill.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish it was only $150, but
Right.
I have two growing
Are we
kids.
about ready to go into like what some of this real math, like real world
Yeah, you want to
numbers?
know what it would
Yes,
what it
'cause
would do
that's-
to you,
That is,
Chris?
I mean, that is definitely
It
like a
matters.
way for people to justify how much more is my candy bar going to be, how much more is my gallon of
Sure.
milk going to be, like, and so I mean, because a lot of people
Right.
can't think in
The millions.
multi-million dollar budgets. They can
Yeah.
think in their hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollar budgets.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you get to the point, when I first started covering city government, it was this weird thing because it would deal with these numbers that were like, there's this term that I've heard, it's just stupid big numbers. And basically it just means a number that is big enough that you can't visualize how many that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think $1 million was a lot of money until I started covering government. And I found out that you can barely do anything for under $1 million. It's really bizarre how I think about it now.
It's true. It changes the perspective.
But when I'm talking about my own budget, obviously, I'm not dealing in millions. I'm dealing in hundreds. So let's talk to the average person in Stillwater like us, who has
us.
to buy groceries.
We do. We have to go get groceries. We have to feed our families. We have to go do whatever at the stores to shop local, of course. So if you were to go to the store and spend $150 on your groceries right now, let's get the exact what it would cost. So right now, if you spend $150 on groceries, you're paying $13.22 in tax. If this were to pass and we increase our sales tax to a half a cent, which would then make it 9.313% as our sales tax, that would be on that same $150 purchase, $13.97. So you'd see an increase of 75 cents.
Okay.
Which I mean, it does add up, right? And if you're someone without a lot of means, that can add up. But whenever we collectively can all increase 75 cents on our purchase, it helps us do things to our streets that we need.
Let's do another math one. So now I just went, I'm guessing there's sales tax. I haven't bought a car recently, but let's say somebody buys a $50,000 car.
Oh, I didn't write that one down, Chris.
I'm just trying to go on like what's the bigger, what's like some of the biggest purchases, because there's no sales tax on like buying a home.
That's a cheap car.
$50,000 car.
It shouldn't be.
That's more than my first house.
Norman has his calculator out.
Yes, he's calculating as we speak.
Yeah, he's in the process.
$250.
$250 on a $50,000 car.
In addition, like more, like we're paying $250 more in tax
than you would.
So
with
that's
this
not,
additional half cents.
Yes,
Okay.
And so it's in that when we're looking at it and with those numbers, it's fairly insignificant, but it makes significant changes in our community, and that's where we're calling these time projects. This whole process that we're going through with the upcoming bonds, and then with these sales tax initiatives, they're time projects, which stands for Together Investing in Municipal Excellence, because it really takes us all together investing in order to have a municipality that we want to consider excellent. So, and this is one of those things that it's just time to invest, and that really would not put us in one of the higher tax brackets either. So, if this does pass and we then have a sales tax of 9.313%, there would still be 30 higher tax rates in the state of Oklahoma than Stillwater, and that represents over 200 communities that would still have a higher tax rate than us. So it doesn't put us anywhere.
What's our nearby neighbors at?
So our nearby neighbors, if we go to Guthrie, we're at 9%, Enid 9.1, Ponca City 9.25, Cushing. So if you wanted to go to a Walmart that's not in Stillwater because you were mad about the sales tax, and you go to Cushing, it's 9.313, which is what ours would be. So
okay,
yeah,
I mean it's similar, and larger communities can have a lower sales tax. I mean, Edmond, Oklahoma City, it's not as high, but they have more to pull from.
Sure thing.
More people are pitching in. Is there? So one of the pushbacks on this is that it is still considered a regressive sales tax. So what do you say to somebody that just is like, it's this, so no?
I mean, I'm not going to probably change their minds if that's how they come into the conversation. I would just say, as someone who has worked a whole lot in my career with people who live on the margins and financial stability, I mean, with Our Daily Bread and the work I did there, I'm very familiar with the idea that it's hard. Yeah. And at a where I'm at, it's easy for me to say that 75 cents is not a big deal, and that is not the same story for a vast majority of the residents that live in Stillwater. So it's good for us to acknowledge that. But what I would say is, I mean, the reality of being a municipality in Oklahoma means we have to rely on sales tax. Yeah. We have to. That's how it's set up. And so we have to be creative within that, and then also really partner and rely on our nonprofits and each other so that we can see what we can do for families.
You know, one of the things that occurs to me about this as well is you were talking about this. So, I mean, sales tax is something that everyone pays. And Stillwater is a destination. I remember seeing a study, I think it was a former fire chief had put together, and they were talking about the population of Stillwater. And I believe the projection, and I don't remember where he got his data, but basically he said that the population of Stillwater increases by, I want to say, almost 20% every Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, from people from outlying areas coming into town.
Oh, yeah.
So these are
Yeah.
people who don't live here, who are, driving on the infrastructure, who are using the infrastructure, who are pretty involved in the city of Stillwater and probably spend a fair amount of time here. But maybe they wouldn't be paying property tax or something else.
Exactly.
But this is a way that anyone who uses our infrastructure can help support it, is sort of the argument I've heard
Yeah. I mean, and
for using a sales tax.
everyone has skin in the game whenever it's a sales tax. I mean, if you're going to an OSU football game, and we're trying to make sure that our infrastructure can support people coming to OSU athletics, so we want to make sure that everyone then helps pay those sales tax dollars.
Okay, so we've got those are the two sides to it. It spreads it out among everyone who uses it, but also for people who don't have a whole lot of money, maybe they're going to pay a little bit higher. They're going to pay a higher percentage of their income.
Yeah, that is true.
In sales tax.
That is
okay,
true.
so that's kind of the rub.
And more than likely, like, increasing the sales tax is not suddenly going to change most, especially on the tourist side, like whether they come here or not for those things or any of that. They're not going to be like, oh, shoot, I don't want to be a Cowboys fan because the Sooners they're cheaper. People just don't make decisions that way.
And they're not.
Okay,
Let's be clear here.
So on the sales tax, let's talk about what the proposition actually says, what it would actually do, and how that's different than that half cent we have now.
Yeah,
in
what
terms
we
of
can
like
do with
sunset expiration, in terms of amount, how much it would generate. Let's just look at all of that.
You want me to go, Norman?
Yeah, you have it right there in
I
front of you.
have it right here. No, you're telling everyone our secrets. It's the
She's
notes
got
are
a
in front
whole
of me.
binder. She brought a binder with her.
Okay,
Yeah.
we pay these people, folks. This is what we want. We want
They do
prepared
research.
human beings that know what they're talking about.
There you go. Thank you, Chris. So our current half cent sales tax is set to expire or sunset in 5 more years. So on this proposition, when you go to vote on February 8th between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. or early election, Thursday and Friday, when you go to vote, you'll see on the question that if you're voting yes, you are saying that our current half cent sales tax we'll take that away, and then we're replacing it with a full cent, and then that would expire or sunset in 10 years. So so it looks like it's replacing it with a 1 cent or adding a 1 cent. You're only adding a half a cent. Does that make sense?
Because you're repealing the
We're
current
repealing the
half
current
cent
one.
and replacing it with a full cent.
Yes.
That would then last for 10 years.
Yes. That way we're not coming back in 5 years and saying, hey, we need this other half cent. Just makes more sense.
So how did they come up with the 10-year time frame for this?
Well, it's projected to bring in about $80 million if we're looking at, $8 million a year for a cent.
Okay. So
That's right. And with 68 million, 68 and a half, whatever is currently on the books, and you add in the inflation of the last several months, and you add in the inflation of 10 years, it is probably going to be pretty close to a wash in terms of being able to get those projects done.
Okay, so let's be clear on that. And I know this is like this. There's so many variables that can happen, but that maybe let me translate it this way: if this tax was passed, that roughly in a decade we could get caught up on road projects and at least maintenance and all that.
Yes.
Okay.
And perhaps, I don't want to muddy the waters here, but perhaps faster, because we may be able to bond that revenue at a cheap rate.
Okay.
If we can bond that revenue at a cheap rate, we can move the priority of some of those projects up and get them done.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. So basically what you're doing is you're borrowing money. Interest rates are very low right now.
Right.
So you would be borrowing money and using the sales tax proceeds to pay do the debt service.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then that lets you pay this stuff. Now, what I've always heard over the years is that construction costs rise on average around 10% a year, is what I've always been told, is the quick and dirty math people use. So a lot of times I've heard people say, well, if we can go ahead and do this, and as you said right now, while money's really cheap, go ahead and borrow that money at a cheaper rate. And then, because if we waited 5 years, it would be that much more expensive. And in the long run, we're saving money by paying a little bit of interest right now and getting it done.
Right.
Is that kind of the situation?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't
good.
know for certain that's going to happen,
Sure.
but it's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. So that opens up the door to having that option anyway.
That's right.
Okay. But we don't know for sure that that's what would happen, but at least it's available.
Right.
Okay.
What if we played a hypothetical here? The opposite is it doesn't. We hear a lot where somebody's like, man, I wish you could find another way to pay for this. The levers that we seemingly have are sales tax and fees, I guess, in various ways, and bonds. Like that's really the only levers available to generate income, right?
Well, and bond debt service comes from property tax, right? So,
Yes,
I mean,
and
that's the only way to leverage property tax.
Okay.
To
If
pay
you
for
talk about,
things.
I
Yeah,
guess
and
maybe I need an explainer on the bond property tax relationship.
there's a revenue bond, which is different than a property tax. It
Okay.
does not require a vote of the people.
Okay.
It's where you're borrowing money based on certain revenue that you have. It's still called a bond,
Okay.
but you're not talking about taxing people's property. One of the things that occurs here in Stillwater that not many people know is that roughly 33% of the residential property in Stillwater is owner occupied.
Okay.
At the last numbers I saw, that may be a little higher now. I don't know. And you're going to think I'm stuck on 33%, but within the city limits, if you look inside the city limits and you start looking at City Hall and other city property, look at the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, look at the State Votech Department, Meridian Tech, the public schools, SMC,
Churches.
OSU.
OSU, all the other nonprofits that are here do not pay ad valorem tax.
Got it.
So that
And how
makes
much is that?
Or
So
What
is
do you
that
mean?
33% of the
About
property in town?
33%.
Then
does
is a
not pay
tax?
actually. That's correct.
Okay.
So
so
That
third
makes that-
doesn't pay. A third is property owned, and then the other third is
Renters. Right?
like somebody
it's
owns it.
rental, but what you're going to do is end up passing that along to the renter. I mean,
Got
if I'm
it.
a landlord
Okay.
and my property tax goes up, you're going to bump that up,
You can buy
probably.
rent. Okay, so rent. Okay.
So when you're talking about a long-term item versus a short-term item like a $9 million fire station, there's a whole different, I think, set of circumstances there. And that fire station is more for this area, not the catchment area
Okay. Gotcha.
or the market area
Gotcha.
or whatever you want to call it.
Okay. So with the new sales tax, if it passes, what is the difference between what could be funded with it and what you can pay for now with the current half cent?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing?
No.
So are there more limitations on that half cent and what it can be used for?
Well, it has to be used for transportation, period.
Okay.
And I want to make clear that if we're replacing pipes into the street, it comes out of water capital or sewer capital, not the transportation fund.
So that's that multiple moving parts we were talking about earlier, where you're coordinating with different departments and different
Yes.
budgets.
Yes. And in the past, the city's been criticized. Oh, you passed this thing 20 years ago and you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And because you didn't do it, we don't trust you to do anything now.
Yeah, that
I've heard that.
we have actually heard that. Yes. Okay.
One
so
of the
have we,
things that
Chris.
one of the things that we have strongly recommended to this council is that they appoint an oversight board to sit and watch and look at. Here are the projects we're planning on doing right now. Here's the bids we received. Here's how we're spending the money, and this is the account that it's coming out of. And those people, obviously, being a city council appointment, would have council's ear if we started playing with things, monkeying with things.
And that's kind of
they're gonna find
the
out.
other levers, right, that we have in this relationship between city staff, elected officials, as the public. Is one thing is just to put another layer of some sort of public group together to try to, vet things and make sure, more perspectives and stuff like that are heard.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, now I had the idea for some reason that the previous sales tax, that the way it was defining transportation projects, that it was defined more narrowly in some way. Because I thought I'd heard a discussion where this new tax would allow, all these other factors like the alternative transportation to be addressed. Is that just because there's more funding to work with?
I think so. I think that, we've been doing alternative transportation with the other.
Okay.
So, no, I think that probably is a misconception.
Okay. All right.
That is. We might have to, because I think when we previously talked about this,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to throw Michelle under the bus. She's
No, I
got to
believe
remember a whole bunch of stuff for
No,
brief periods of time and then long term. But I think it was like, we thought that it was just
Absolutely.
it's only for paving streets. You couldn't spend it for sidewalks or any other projects, and that this
Right.
was a way to broaden the scope of that. But what we're learning is that scope is still the same. It's just more money, and that you guys have actually used part of that funds to go throw a sidewalk in or fix something related.
Okay.
Right, and since there's that previous half-cent election
Right.
was a little over 5 years ago, and the language could have changed there from the
From the original.
From the original, yeah.
Okay, so it could have been broadened a little bit
'Cause it was renewed,
when it
yes.
was renewed a few years ago.
Okay.
Yes.
So we were halfway
Okay.
there. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Who knows?
Well, this is the whole point of,
That is why
Of
we
doing
have
this.
these discussions,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, we need to learn.
Okay. No, I don't even feel bad about it. I read
You shouldn't.
I read and hear a lot of stuff, and it's hard to keep it all straight.
I'll say that didn't end in print. That was just on the pod.
Let's talk about, you were talking about about $68 million in road projects. What are some of the big ones that the city's responsible for? Because we know that, obviously 6th Avenue, Perkins Road, those are with ODOT. We've got Oklahoma Department of Transportation because those are state highways going through town. But there are other roads that the city alone is responsible for.
Well, let's talk about 51 and 177 for a minute.
Okay, let's talk about those.
Because the city is not immune from having to spend money on those. Because
sure.
what happens is that ODOT comes in and says, we're going to redo your street. And here's what we're going to do. And then we have to look at the right-of-way, at the utilities, at the sidewalks, all those things that currently exist, and we have to move them, or we have to fix drainage, or we have to do whatever may. And in the case of Perkins Road, I think it was somewhere around $3.5 million for that 1 mile where we had to move utilities and get ready for ODOT to come in and spend $18 million, I think, somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But
To
who
do
knows?
that 1 mile between McElroy and Lakeview, and then they will come back and resurface from 3rd to McElroy.
Okay, so basically ODOT comes to town and they say, hey, congratulations. We've got a big project on our 8-year plan. It's come up. We're going to redo this road in your town, and it's going to be great. By the way, we need $3.5 million from you.
Well, we're the ones that pay the $3.5 million.
That's what I mean,
But
but-
yes.
Pretty much.
And when you think about it, I think West 6th is going to cost us somewhere in the vicinity of four and a half. I don't remember. And they're going to spend 25 is what they're estimating. We spent 3.5 out on Perkins Road for $18 million. That's a pretty good return on money, and those are two major roads now that have been completely reconstructed. Mm-hmm. So, other areas, Lakeview, West Lakeview, McElroy needs attention badly. There's a whole list of streets that, unfortunately, I didn't bring with me, that need attention, but those are on our website if you want to look that up.
Okay, so we've got
There's
the
a
big
map with
streets
those
and
on
everything, but what about, so what happens with like the littler streets, the neighborhood streets? Those are the ones that kind of drive people crazy too. The ones they drive on every day on their way home. How would having more money impact the city's ability to address those?
It is our plan to continue to address those as well through our pavement management program, and we're working on some horrible streets right now, or getting ready to work on some horrible streets right now over in the Monticello College Gardens area, and then we'll move on from there. Will those be done as quickly as the arterials and the collectors and that kind of thing? Probably not, but they will get done.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'm assuming anyway that a lot of those decisions are made based on traffic counts, where they go, how many people use those streets every day. It seems like that would move it up the list in terms of priority.
And it may. And we have this magic gizmo that comes in here every year that is mounted on a vehicle. They drive every street in Stillwater, and they provide us with a report that comes from ground penetrating radar and lasers and other magic that's in that vehicle. And that is what controls our pavement management program. You have people tell you, you just put in you just repaved 2 miles out on 19th Street. Well, we may have just repaved it 3 or 4 years ago, but the pavement management system tells us you need to microseal that, and all it is a very thin layer of goop that gets down into the cracks and things, so that when we're in the depth of winter, if we ever get any rain anymore, that rain doesn't get into those cracks. It freezes, it blows out those streets and makes the cracks bigger, and you've got a big maintenance problem. So some of those neighborhood streets are also predicated on their age and what that device that they drive around tells our engineering staff.
Okay, so to summarize this, what I'm hearing is that the pavement management program does sort of a grading for the different streets in terms of their condition.
Like a hard analysis.
Exactly. And if a street's just starting to maybe crack or something like that, if you do some targeted interventions right now, then you can extend the life of that street. But if a street's too far gone, doing those little things isn't really going to do a whole lot for it.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example is that it's South Main from 12th Street south to the bridge.
Okay.
Was in terrible shape. That device came in here. It told our engineers all of this stuff, and they went in and diamond grind that street. I don't know if you've driven on it lately, but if you go down and look at it, you can see very clearly that they diamond grinded that street, and then they put the parkings back. That street's pretty smooth. And there wasn't, those costs are expensive. It wasn't $1 million, but...
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you do on a concrete street, right?
Right.
Okay, to smooth,
you can
to smooth
do
the
that.
surface.
Yeah.
Right. On an asphalt street, you generally mill and overlay
Okay.
if you're not reconstructing. So
when people are seeing these targeted interventions, like those really thin overlays, those micro overlays or whatever, it seems to me, though, that this is sort of the idea that we have to maintain what we're building, right? Because that's been a little bit of that tension too. It's like as you said earlier, we don't have the money to build new stuff and to maintain it. And so do you choose to just keep building more things, or do you choose to maintain what you've got and then you don't have any money left to build? At some point, though, you have to start maintaining, right?
that's right. And and we are. And
yeah. But when you see those things, that's maintenance.
Yes.
That's the stuff that we've been complaining about not having.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
a lot of people can look at roads and whatever you did to it can't distinguish the cost for truly repairing some of these, like you said, a full rebuild versus those maintenance things. They just kind of see it all together as just road work.
Right.
And then University, for example, going from Western in, it just recently got re-overlaid, but it didn't seemingly get much of a mill. It's still kind of wobbly. And I'm sure that's going to last for, so long, because there's probably a more longer term plan to be this one, because I know there's some water issues or something probably there too. Well, actually, I know there are. I've driven through it many times and ridden a bike through it many of times. What's the street where it floods really bad there? Right behind Westwood.
Walnut.
But so it's we basically kind of put a couple year or longer patch on it.
Band-Aid.
Yeah, a Band-Aid. And yes, that Band-Aid is eventually going to wear off, because the underneath problem, we have not been able to invest to fix that yet.
Right.
Okay, so we've got areas like that as well that are just kind of make it a little bit better until we do the long-term solution. Okay, so I feel like I feel like I've got a better handle on this. Let's look at what else is on my list here. I think we really covered a lot of what I wanted to cover. What have we not talked about? What do people need to know or understand?
Well, I think the major thing is that we're not going to be able to do much to the roads without some influx of revenue of some type or another. People always tell us, well, go get a grant. Well, we've tried to do that. And, unfortunately, and this seems to be just a fact of life, major cities are first in line for that money. And smaller municipalities seem to be on the back burner.
Because it's probably easy to say, okay, here's this grant for $10 million. This $10 million in a large city is going to impact 1 million people or something like that. And it's like, well, shoot, they need $10 million too just to fix a couple miles of road, but it's only going to impact 50,000 people.
That's right. And those million people vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Do you think there's any federal funding possible? I know we just passed the infrastructure
bills.
I mean, is that basically goes to the states, and then the states decide, or I guess that goes to ODOT on kind of how they want to. I know the legislative's going to
it's
get their
in the
hands
legislature and the governor's office at this point. We don't know.
Got it.
Okay, so there are no guarantees on that. So this is us taking care of ourselves.
But the idea, though, I feel like from the federal level was to try to get some of that money down into all infrastructure issues, right?
That's true, but some of it is more earmarked for water, and we have needs in that area as well. So
Okay. Gotcha. So there are some possibilities of some other funding down the road.
But the feds aren't coming to the rescue anytime soon. There's no magic parachute that's just going to come down.
Not that I've heard.
Not of consequence.
Okay.
Not of consequence.
Okay, that's good to know.
We received $4.4 million in ARPA funds. We will, in fact, I'll be saying Monday night, or actually Christy Cluck will be saying Monday night that we'll take a report to council on that. There are strings, and you have to use it for specific things, and water infrastructure's up there. So.
Well, and the thing with that is we don't just supply water for our city. We've become a regional water supplier.
75,000 people.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. Okay, so moving on from transportation, let's talk about the visitor tax very quickly, because the proposed visitor tax, from the proceeds, there would be a 70-30 split. 70% would go to Visit Stillwater to use for additional visitor recruitment activities and grants and things like that. 30% would be set aside, and the city would be handling the use of that with the help of a committee, I believe.
Yes.
Talk to us about how that would work.
Right now, we project that would produce about $330,000 a year. That 30%. And there is the...
The name? Do you want it?
Yes.
Tourism Advisory Committee.
Tourism Advisory Committee. We've got
good to have
Tourism
a binder.
Advisory Committee. We've got the Time Advisory Committee. We've got all kinds of committees. Yeah.
And Christy told us, I think, who was on that committee and stuff like that when we talked to her.
Yeah, there's a breakdown of certain group.
And they would oversee, again, that is specifically for amenities that would bring visitors to Stillwater. So you can kind of let your mind race. It could be somebody wants to start the Wondatorium again. Somebody wants to have more ball fields, have a tourism destination for teams that come in here and have tournaments. Mm-hmm. There's a museum that would be a big draw. There are all kinds of things that you could think of that would be an amenity that would draw people.
I think one of them Chris Norris talked about was, ball fields and a soccer complex, and talking about how if we had a good facilities, that then some of these tournaments and that attract visitors and their sales tax too. So that's how this is related.
That's right.
It does work together.
Yeah, that they can bring outside people in, outside money in.
Yeah, my youngest is in soccer, and we go all over to to play soccer. I mean, most places other than Stillwater. So I'd
There
love
you
to
go.
have everyone come here.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Just some ideas. We're not
Okay.
on that group. We
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
beyond that point now. Thank goodness.
unless
but-
we've influenced them, because we're influencers, Michelle.
Yeah, I feel
Kidding.
pretty influential, Chris. I really do.
I don't know about you, Michelle, but I got grandkids.
That's
it's
true.
Not completely out.
No, that's true. No, mine cheer. They're into cheerleading, which is
Interesting.
hard for me to wrap my head around because I'm, I know I seem like someone who was probably a cheerleader. No, I don't. But anyway,
I wasn't a cheerleader either. So
thank you.
I was
Thank
band
you,
geek.
Becky. Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Me
Band
too.
geek.
yeah, well,
There you go.
there you go.
Anyway, so we've addressed the visitor tax and how the city's going to look at that. We've addressed transportation. So anything else you guys want to say? Anything we missed?
Get out and vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Early
Sounds
voting on the 3rd and 4th. Certainly not trying to tell you how to vote, but get out and vote on the 3rd and 4th. Early voting at the administration building at Payne County and the general election on Tuesday the 8th.
We'd love to see record turnout. I mean, that'd be great.
Yeah, we really would. We have been not good at
No.
voting here in municipal elections, and would like to see
Yeah.
a big turnout.
Municipal election turnout has been pretty low.
No matter how it goes, we'd
And
like
that
to see
and
it.
that is Michelle and I's kind of one of our goal of this podcast is growing civic engagement, which ultimately hopefully means more people participating in the process. And that one way is simply to vote
Absolutely.
or show up to a city council meeting.
Yeah. Watch it online, anything. Just
Yep.
get involved, really.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you.
And this has been Grassroots. Thanks for listening.
Thanks again to Work It for sponsoring this series. For more information about Studio Stillwater and how you can help support our mission as a listener or sponsor, go to studiostillwater.net. There you can sign up for emails, get a free sticker, or send us a message. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.